Hey, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Jesper Lawman, who says, Steve, what do you think about the recent hacking of the online cheating site Ashley Madison? Is it a good idea to publicly reveal the names of thousands of people who have been attempting to cheat on their spouses? This one has me torn, because on the one hand, I feel very little sympathy for the people who were using Ashley Madison to try and cheat on their wives or girlfriends or whatever. And statistically, it is overwhelmingly men who use that site. The figure I saw is something like 95% of the registered users of Ashley Madison are men. And even many of the apparently female profiles are actually just fakes. So it's overwhelmingly dudes who are trying to cheat on their wives or girlfriends or whatever. And I naturally have very little sympathy for that and for people who would go to such lengths to do that. But at the same time, I am really troubled by the idea of having their information, or the fact that they were on this site, made public information. I don't think that's the best way to address these sorts of problems. Someone else left a comment under your question, I think, saying basically, isn't this, whether we personally approve or disapprove of this type of behavior, it's really nobody's business but the cheater and the partner being cheated on, and the person being cheated on that partner with, if the prospective cheater is able to find someone to cheat with, which, if he's a member of Ashley Madison, he probably didn't. I'm troubled by it enough that it has short-circuited my schadenfreude about this. I'm not reveling in it as I sometimes do when things like this happen, because it does feel very invasive, the way that this information was just sort of thrown out for general view. JJ Talks. Here's my question, and I hope it's good enough for you. If a close friend of yours asked you to be the godparent of their baby, and this person wasn't super religious, would you accept? In this scenario, we are pretending you like children. I know it's rooted in Christianity, but it seems it has now often become a secular position that basically just means you're a non-familial person who gets to be a part of the family. You know what? Your attitude really needs work, okay? I wouldn't object to it on religious grounds. If someone was very close to me and they were a parent and they wanted me to be the godparent to their child, whether they were super religious or they weren't, that wouldn't factor into it for me. If they were super religious and it was a religious thing for them, I mean, it wouldn't be a religious thing for me. If it wasn't a religious thing for them, it still wouldn't be a religious thing for me. I would consider it. And the fact that it's traditionally been more of a religious role wouldn't scare me off. I mean, traditionally, when you say that someone is going to be the godfather or the godmother of your child, it means that if anything happens to the child's natural parents, then you as the godparents would sort of take up the burden and would raise the child. And that's a pretty heavy request to make of somebody, even though hopefully it'll never have to be, you'll never have to make good on it, because your friends, the parents, will be okay and nothing will happen to them. But, it's a very heavy request. That's something that you would probably only make of people that you were really, really close with. And if someone who I had that kind of a close friendship with asked me to play that role, then I guess I would seriously consider it. And in real life, even with my aforementioned lack of enthusiasm for being a parent, I might seriously consider it if it was a really close friend. Huey Gibson. As a new atheist, I'm finding myself getting angry when I see people, family, friends, coworkers, pushing for religious-based legislation. My question is, how long did it take to get past that anger? Or have you? Also, I've felt like I should be doing more for the secular movement, but I live in a small town, in a rural area, and haven't been able to find a way to do that. Most, 99% of the local groups, are faith-based. Can you give me an idea how to find a secular place to volunteer for the movement, or ways to help the movement that may not be an organization per se? Thank you, and keep making the great videos. Thanks, Huey. Well, as far as finding ways to help with the secular movement, there are many organizations online that you could look into. Someone actually left a comment on your question, I noticed, suggesting that you check out the Secular Coalition for America, which is secular.org. that, I would second that recommendation. Check into that website. They can put you in touch with people maybe in your local area or within a sort of reasonable distance of where you are that maybe you could help out with. There are meetups. There are usually secular atheist meetups. Again, depending on where you live, depending on how far you're willing to travel. I know for my personal area, I've never gone to one because I'm not terribly interested in that sort of thing. But where I'm from, there are no secular meetup groups that meet regularly in my actual town or in my immediate area. But there are a few within half an hour or an hour's drive if I really wanted to go. So you can find those options if you look for them, and I would recommend that you do that if you're interested in becoming more involved as an activist in the secular movement. As for when does the anger go away, with me, with certain things, the anger is still there. And it's just with certain areas, like with religious-based legislation, with Christians in America acting like they are a persecuted minority. That really gets on my nerves. That makes me angry when Christians declare that they need such and such a new law to protect their religious liberty in the United States, where the religious liberty of Christians is probably the least threatened freedom we have ever had to this day. That makes me angry. Christians claiming the right to cite their religious beliefs to mistreat people, including their own children in some cases, that makes me angry. But that's the sort of thing that would make me angry no matter what the underlying cause was. Neglect or mistreatment of children, or parents putting their own desires ahead of the needs of their children, is something that will always make me angry, regardless of whether it's based in religion or not. Someone trying to get the law to protect and empower their mistreatment or rejection or discrimination against others is something that will always make me angry, whether it's rooted in religion or not. So those are things that make me angry. But I don't think they're necessarily tied exclusively to my atheism. I think it's more just me not wanting to see people mistreated and me not wanting to see people be able to get away with having the law protect them for being bigoted assholes. Theodore Morris. Hey Steve, do you have any irrational guilty pleasures? What I mean is, I'm an atheist and I don't believe in things in the likes of ghosts or demons, etc., but I do enjoy the occasional creep subject. I'll find myself roaming YouTube in search of videos on UFOs, aliens, dimensional time slips, mimetic entities, etc. I know for the most part that it's either fake or something we have long to understand, but entertaining nonetheless. How about you? I'll give you a specific one. If you've ever heard the story of John Titor, who was supposedly a time traveler from the year 2030 something, who began posting on message boards. I think he might have been posting on the Coast to Coast AM message board, which is kind of a red flag right there. But he posted under the name John Titor, and he claimed to be a time traveler who had gone back in time. First, he had gone back in time to the 70s on a mission, but then he had stopped off in the year 2000 or 2001 to see family or something, was the explanation. And I thought, oh, that's nice. They send time travelers back on important missions, but they give them a chance to relax and take a little time traveling vacation before they have to go home. That's nice that we treat our time travelers so well in the future. But yeah, if you've never heard of that, look into that story. That's a weirdly fascinating story. It's obvious bullshit. There's not even a little tiny part of me that thinks it might be true, but it's a really interesting story. Resendr Wild. Hey Steve, do you use the term reverse racism? I see the term only existing because of white privilege, as in only whites are superior, so only whites can be racist. Would not reverse racism be total acceptance based on one's race? Reverse racism is not a term that I really like. I don't use it myself very often, but I do think it is worth drawing a distinction between racial discrimination practiced by white people or by privileged people and feelings of resentment or bitterness toward another race felt by people who have been oppressed. It's sort of like sometimes people express it this way. They say black people can't be racist because racism is prejudice plus power. In other words, what we usually think of as racism, what we usually talk about when we're talking about racism, are things like discrimination, institutionalized prejudice, things that really affect people's lives in very damaging ways. And that kind of racism, that kind of prejudice, can't really be practiced by, in the case of the United States, black folks, because they are very seldom in the position of power to be able to influence that kind of institutionalized racism. It's mostly just white people who have the ability to not just feel bitterness or feel resentment toward people of other races, but then to put it into action and to actually inflict harm on people through systemic racism and that sort of thing. So I do think even though I don't like the term reverse racism, I do think that it is useful, and I think actually even necessary, if you want to understand things like institutionalized racism, to draw a distinction between that kind of discrimination inflicted on people of color and feelings of, resentment, let's say toward white people, felt by a black person who has maybe been the victim of that kind of prejudice. I think those are very different things, and I think they need to be considered separately. Ray Comfort raped me. My ass is the perfect cum target. Steve, I need help. I was debating this Christian tit shit. I pointed out a couple of things from the Old Testament, and he says, oh, that's the Old Testament. It doesn't count anymore. I'm a New Testament Christian. It's really frustrating, and what's worse is then I'm forced to limit myself in only New Testament criticism. How do you deal with these Jesus fucks, and how do you deal with the attitude of Old Testament does not count? Do you limit yourself for their sake, or do you try to show them it should count? Any thoughts or advice? Thanks. As far as trying to show them that it should count, I maybe would point out that Jesus certainly seemed to think that the Old Testament still counted. There are significant differences in the Old Testament versus the New Testament, as you would expect, because the New Testament was written much later by a different group of people. But yeah, there are differences in the Old Testament and the New Testament that maybe make it somewhat legitimate for a Christian whose faith is based mostly on the teachings of the New Testament to say, well, let's just focus on this and not worry about the Old Testament. But if you do limit yourself, and you can say it's for their sake, you can say just, as a fun exercise for you, as an arguer and a debater, sticking just to the New Testament, there's plenty of stuff there. You don't have to go back to the Old Testament to find reasons to not be a Christian. I mean, the Old Testament is full of really easy stuff, but the New Testament is full of some really good stuff too. I mean, there are teachings of Jesus that suggest he's kind of into thought policing, that he doesn't really draw that much of a distinction, if any distinction, between thinking about committing a sin and actually committing a sin. That troubles me a lot. Jesus himself is kind of a jerk. There are some relatively famous examples of Jesus just acting like a dick in the New Testament. There's the famous tale of how he withered a fig tree because he wanted a fig and there were no figs on the tree. The punchline is figs weren't in season at the time this story takes place, so there wouldn't have been figs on the tree, and Jesus just kind of blamed the tree for no reason. There are all kinds of things in the New Testament that you can... I mean, the Apostle Paul himself, the writings of Paul are full of things. I mean, some of Paul's writings, and to be fair to Paul, the worst stuff are in the disputed epistles that people aren't sure if Paul himself actually wrote. But there's some really nasty anti-gay, anti-woman stuff in the Pauline epistles that you could look at too. So if you want to limit yourself to just the New Testament, or if the person you're talking to is insisting that you only talk about the New Testament and leave out the Old, there's plenty of material there. Plenty of material in the New Testament. Shane Simpson, quick question. Christians and Muslims and Jews all claim that their God is omniscient, that he knows the outcome of everything. So can God change his mind? being that he already knows the outcome in advance? Yeah, if he can't change his mind, that would seem to limit his omnipotence, wouldn't you say? If he is incapable of changing his mind, then that's something that God does not have the power to do. That means that he is not fully omnipotent, right? But many Christians get out of this problem by saying, well, it's not that God couldn't change his mind if he wanted to. It's just that all of the things that are happening are things that God had determined would happen since the very beginning, since eternity. In other words, the plan that is now working itself out is God's, not only God's perfect plan, but God's eternal plan. The plan has existed from eternity. And because God is perfect, his plan is perfect, which means that he would never have to change his mind to fix anything. So they kind of wriggle out of it that way. I still think it's kind of horseshit, but, that's just me. Jason McGinty. Hey, Steve, so I was out with some friends last Friday night for a night of carousing, debauchery, and assorted tomfoolery, and came across some proselytizers handing out chick tracts. A lady handed me one titled The Empty Tomb. Before that night, the only place I had heard of chick tracts was from your 5 Stupid Things About Chick Tracts video and the Bible Reloaded. Immediately upon reading it, a ray of sunlight shone down upon me. I saw just how wrong I'd been all these years, and I dropped to my knees and devoted my life to Christ. No, that's bullshit. I just said thanks and kept walking. Kept the tract for a souvenir, though. My question for you is, have you ever actually been handed a chick tract in person? If so, what was your reaction? I used to work maintenance at a truck stop, and I would find chick tracts left laying places on a weekly, sometimes daily basis if I got into a good chick tract run. We had a phone room, and of course we had restrooms where people would just leave chick tracts lying around for people to find. So I found them that way quite a bit. But the only time I was ever actually handed one by another person was a truck driver handed one to me outside. I was outside up on one of the fuel islands. I was checking on something or pulling trash. I can't remember. And one of the truck drivers who was there filling up his truck handed me a chick tract. He reached out to me and gave it to me. And he said, "Here you go, man. That's the truth." That's what he said. And I took it and I realized immediately that it was a chick tract. And I didn't laugh right out loud. I felt like that would have been rude. I sort of said, well, thank you. And, put it in my pocket. And when I had a moment to myself at work, I pulled it out and looked at it. Because I always read chick tracts if I find them. And then I throw them away. Because they're entertaining, but they're also horrifying and terrible things. And you wouldn't want them to, bother anybody else. So once I read it, I tore it into pieces and I threw it in the trash. That was my reaction. John Henderson. Steve, just saw your video on transphobia. Loved it. However, I was hoping I could get clarification on the subject of trans panic. Are you saying that a cis, straight, intimate partner should accept a trans person when they find out they are not cisgender? Should trans people tell their potential partners whether or not they're trans, especially if they're going to be intimate? I'm a cisgender male attracted to cis females. I have no control over that attraction, and that attraction is partially tied to cis female genitalia. I support that trans women are women, but as graphic as it is, I do not want to be intimate with someone with male genitalia. I have a few things to say to this. First of all, it's not my intention to make you feel bad for the way you naturally are. That's why I think we need to stand up for trans people, because they shouldn't be made to feel bad and shouldn't be punished for the way they naturally are. And I don't think you as a cis person who is attracted to cis women should be made to feel bad for the way you naturally are, for who you just are naturally attracted to. So that's not my intention here at all. My sympathy lies more with the trans woman in your hypothetical scenario than with the cis man. While I can sympathize with a cis man who says, I don't mean any harm, but I'm just not attracted to trans women and I just don't want to be in that situation, I am much more sympathetic and much more concerned about making life better for the trans woman in such a situation who faces the prospect of not merely being uncomfortable or not knowing what to do or not knowing a graceful way to exit the situation, but being rejected, being shamed, being denigrated, being made to feel like a freak or like less than something that she is. In some cases, being threatened or even victimized by violence. So I'm much more worried about her and how she is treated than I am with assuring my fellow cis men that there's nothing wrong with the way they feel. So it's not that I don't care, and it's not that I think that there's anything wrong with you or that you're automatically a jerk or a transphobe or whatever, but I'm much, much more concerned with the people in those scenarios who I judge as being more vulnerable and more worthy of sympathy and more worthy of help and more worthy of people like me trying to encourage understanding on their behalf, and that would be the trans folks. The other thing is, look, I've never been intimate with a trans woman. I've never had that experience. I would like to think if I met someone who I was really attracted to, and let's say I didn't know that they were trans at first, and it turned out that they were, that if I were really attracted to them and I really liked them, and I found them to be beautiful or sexy or alluring or whatever, that I would not let that alone stop me. Now, the first time might be really awkward. I probably wouldn't know what the hell to do. But I would like to think I would not let that stop me, that would not be a barrier to me, even though I historically have gone for cis women. You know, I don't think that should prevent me from being attracted to a trans woman and from following through on that attraction if it was a mutual thing and if that's what we wanted to do. Now, what you decide to do is up to you. But for me personally, I can't say for sure that's what I would do, but that's what I would like to think of myself. I'd like to think that that's what I would do if I was in that situation. I would just play it cool. Like I play it cool when the thunder comes. I mean, I could be really stressed out. I could be nervous and full of lightning round panic, but I'm not. I've got it under control. I'm confident in myself. Confident enough to say that it is now time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Troubleshooter 125, lightning round question. Steve, when Ashley is cooking dinner, what's your favorite dish she creates? She's really great with soup. She makes an amazing potato soup that I just love. And usually when we do like shepherd's pie, she's in charge of that too. She puts a nice shepherd's pie together. So those would be two that jump to mind immediately. Stephen Phillips. Steve, when will you take part in a very public spanking of? Or will fear of the folder mean this will never happen? Hey man, I've been on 3 very public spanking ofs, okay? I don't know if they're all still up or have they been flagged and taken down. But I've done 3 of them, baby. I haven't done one for a while. But yeah, I would do another one if they asked me to. Zach Davis. Hey Steve, are you reading any good comic book lines right now? If so, what are they? If not, why not? Thanks. I'm not reading anything current right now. In fact, the only comic I'm reading at the moment is classic Fantastic Four. After the reviews of the new movie came out and were just awful, I really felt like I wanted to go back and read some classic Marvel comics. So I went and I got like the Kindle version of the first volume, the first 10 issues or so of the original Jack Kirby, Stan Lee Fantastic Four. So I'm reading that at the moment, but that's the only comic I'm actually reading right now. Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. Hey Steve, you may not know this about me, but I'm very huge on Disney sitcoms. I can never go a week without watching my favorite sitcoms like Austin and Ally, Liv and Maddie, Dog with a Blog, Best Friends Whenever, and my new favorite guilty pleasure, Bunked. Tell me, Steve, would you definitely like the idea of an atheist-only Disney sitcom? Yeah, I guess I would like an atheist-only Disney sitcom, if for no other reason than having a Disney sitcom centered on atheism would mean that atheists had gained a major level of cultural acceptance. Because Disney doesn't usually fuck with something unless it's fairly safe and middle of the road. So it would be nice to know that atheism had gotten to that point in our popular culture. Practical Magic 9. How do you choose the books for an atheist reads? Do you already have your choices made for 2016? No, I don't. I think the first one for 2016 might be Cold Case Christianity, but I'm not positive. That isn't set in stone. The books are chosen fairly arbitrarily. I have a long list of titles that have either been suggested to me by people or that I've found myself indirectly or through searching or whatever. and I just go through the list when it's time to start picking the books for this next year, and I pick 3 that look good, that look like they'd be relevant, they'd be of interest to my audience, they'd be of interest to me, and I just go for it. I just dive right in. Radical Bacon. It's pawpaw season, Steve. Have you picked up a pawpaw and put it in your mouth? No. David Edwards. We know Stuffy is the first, but in what order did you get your stuffed friends? How many came after you and Ashley joined forces? Everybody other than Stuffy and Toby Benson came after me and Ashley were together. Stuffy was my dog as a child, Toby Benson was Ashley's dog as a child, and all the other cast members came after them. I think first was Jack McPherson, then was Millicent, then was Hans Krieger, then was Prospector Jones. And there will be others to come in the future. Spoiler alert. But yeah, that's those are roughly, I think, the order that we got them, and I think that's also the order in which they were introduced into the videos. Susan Sharp. Steve, I have a question. What would you say to a theist that says God can do anything, that the laws of nature or science don't include God? If God wanted to make the earth and everything on it before the sun, he could. Well, I would say very simply that if that gives that theist some comfort or pleasure, or it pleases them to believe that, that's fine. But if they expect me to believe it, they're going to have to do a lot better than that. They're going to have to show me a reason why that is true, or why that has to be true, or why it's more likely than not that it's true, not some hypothetical scenario where it could be true. That's what I would say. It's one thing for them to believe it, it's quite another for me to believe it, or for you to believe it. Hey, that's it for the questions. Before I get out of here, I'm going to give a shout out to a deserving fellow YouTuber, and god damn it, there are few YouTubers I have discovered lately who deserve it more than this guy. I'm talking about Kevin Logan. In his own words, Kevin describes himself as I pwn manospheric right-wing fuckwads. His major series on his channel is called The Descent of Man-O-Sphere, where he deconstructs and criticizes and pwns basically prominent online members of the manosphere, men's rights activists, anti-feminists, etc. It is awesome. If you watch my content and you know how I feel about anti-feminists and men's rights activists and that whole manosphere thing, you probably know why I think Kevin Logan is awesome. And hopefully you can watch him and you can think he's awesome too. He's really funny. He's a great writer. He's really good at hitting comic beats on camera. I love the way he'll hit a punchline and then he'll just sit on it for a second and he'll kind of just give you a little, which is just, beautiful. Kevin, great job. Thank you for everything that you do, and I hope that you get at least a little tiny bump from the shout out. So Kevin Logan, go check out his channel. It's awesome. Also, I want to remind you, as I always do, to check out the Lemme Listen podcast. It's real easy to check them out now. It's easier than ever to find them. They have their own website, thanks to the great Jason Harding, who is the genius behind these podcasts. Just go to LemmeListenPodcasts.com, and you can hear Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host with Jason. You can hear Let Me Finish, that he does with Finite Atticus, which is hilarious. And you can hear the great improvisational comedy podcast, American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, which is like a weird cross between This American Life and Coast to Coast AM, with a little Twin Peaks thrown in for good measure. It is really, really, really awesome. I highly recommend all of them to you. Check out LemmeListenPodcasts.com. Well, everybody, that's it for me for another week. I am going to take my leave of you, but before I do, I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious, nothing is too silly, and I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, I'll see you, everybody. Take care.